Beneath the veil of ordinary life in a serene neighborhood, the arrival of a newcomer rippled through the community like an unspoken secret. There was nothing particularly unusual about the moving truck or the man who stepped out of it at first glance. Yet, something about him defied categorization and air of precision, a presence that felt too deliberate, too poised. It wasn't just his tailored clothes or the detached politeness with which he greeted the occasional neighbor. It was the stillness he brought with him, a quiet weight that seemed to anchor the very air around his house. The house itself had always been an enigma, sitting at the end of the lane like a forgotten relic, its windows dark and its garden untamed. But under his ownership, it transformed. The lawn was trimmed, the shutters repainted, and yet, instead of becoming inviting, the house seemed more inscrutable, as if it wore a mask of normalcy concealing its true face. The neighbors watched as packages arrived late at night, carried by delivery drivers who left quickly, as though eager to escape its shadow. Rumors began to take shape, birthed in whispers over fences and fueled by the man's reluctance to engage with the community. He was a surgeon, he said, recently relocated. The words were simple enough, but they lacked the warmth of someone eager to be known. It was as though he had rehearsed them, presenting just enough to quench curiosity without allowing anyone to get too close. His aloofness was a thread that unraveled comfort, leaving the community with an unanswered question: what was he hiding? Then came the night when everything changed, a moment of fleeting chaos that would redefine the mystery entirely. Lights flashed, voices echoed in the darkness, and in the aftermath, a figure was carried out on a stretcher. From that point forward, the question wasn't just who he was, but what secrets he had brought with him. A puzzle had been dropped into their quiet lives, and the more they tried to solve it, the more tangled it became. Cedar Grove, nestled in the heart of Fayetteville, Arkansas, was the epitome of Southern charm. The streets were lined with oak trees that whispered in the wind, and every house had a story etched into its weathered brick and wood. Neighbors knew each other by name, and any deviation from the routine was the subject of much speculation. One summer evening, a moving truck rolled into the cul-de-sac, parking in front of the vacant Victorian house at the end of Magnolia Lane. For months, the house had been a source of intrigue. Rumors swirled about its possible sale, but no one knew the identity of the buyer. When a sleek black car pulled into the driveway, the curious eyes of the neighborhood turned toward it. Out stepped a man, tall and composed, his features sharp and deliberate. He wore a tailored suit, unusual for the casual ambience of Cedar Grove. His hair was dark, with a streak of silver running through it, and his expression carried a gravity that was both alluring and intimidating. The man introduced himself as Dr. Alexander Cross. He was a surgeon recently relocated from Boston and had purchased a house to start anew. Despite his polite demeanor, there was a reserve in his interactions that made the neighbors uneasy. His presence felt like a shadow cast over the sunny community. Mrs. Eunice Harper, Cedar Grove's self-appointed gossip, was the first to notice peculiarities about Dr. Cross. He often returned home late at night, sometimes with his clothing slightly disheveled, as if he had been in a rush. His porch light remained on until the early hours, and though the curtains were always drawn, faint movements could be seen inside. Eager to unravel the mystery, Eunice organized a neighborhood barbecue, extending a personal invitation to Dr. Cross. To everyone's surprise, he accepted. The barbecue was abuzz with speculation until the enigmatic doctor finally arrived. He was polite, answering questions with just enough detail to satisfy curiosity without truly revealing much. He spoke about his work in neurosurgery, mentioning the high-stakes nature of his cases and the stress it brought. Yet, his demeanor raised more questions than it answered. When asked why he chose Fayetteville, he simply smiled and said, "A fresh start is sometimes the best prescription." His vague response ignited a wildfire of theories, ranging from a high-profile scandal in Boston to a failed marriage he was escaping. A month after his arrival, the tranquility of Cedar Grove was shattered. One night, Mrs. Harper, unable to sleep, noticed flashing blue and red lights outside her window. An ambulance and a police cruiser were parked in front of Dr. Cross's house. Paramedics wheeled out a stretcher carrying a pale, unconscious woman. The next morning, the neighborhood was alive with rumors. Some claimed to have heard muffled screams, while others insisted they saw Dr. Cross arguing with a woman earlier that evening. Eunice, undeterred by decorum, marched over to the house to confront him. Dr. Cross answered the door, his eyes bloodshot and his demeanor cold. It was a patient, he explained curtly. She sought me out for help. It's a matter of confidentiality. Before Eunice could pry further, he closed the door. The explanation was plausible, but the secrecy only fueled more suspicion. One day, while jogging past Dr. Cross's house, a young woman named Claire, new to the neighborhood herself, spotted something odd. Peering through a gap in the drawn curtains, she saw an elaborate medical setup in his living room. Sterile lights illuminated a surgical table, and shelves lined with instruments gleamed under the stark lighting. Alarmed, Claire confided in her neighbor, Greg, a retired police officer. Greg decided to investigate. Under the pretense of borrowing a tool, he visited Dr. Cross, but his practiced eye caught subtle details: a faint metallic scent in the air, a set of scrubs drying in the laundry room, and a clipboard tucked away on a bookshelf. Greg's suspicions grew. With Claire's help, he conducted an online search for Dr. Alexander Cross. To their astonishment, they discovered no records of a surgeon by that name in Boston or anywhere else. Determined to uncover the truth, Greg contacted a former colleague still active in law enforcement. A few discreet inquiries revealed a shocking detail: the house on Magnolia Lane was previously owned by a reclusive scientist, Dr. Malcolm Price, who had vanished 2 years prior. It seemed improbable that two enigmatic doctors would occupy the same house in such a short span. As Greg delved deeper, he stumbled upon articles about unsanctioned medical experiments conducted by Price. The experiments involved unconventional treatments for terminal illnesses, procedures that were dangerous and unregulated. The descriptions bore a striking resemblance to the setup Greg had glimpsed in Dr. Cross's living room. Fueled by mounting evidence, Greg and Claire decided to confront Dr. Cross. They waited until late one evening when his lights were on. Knocking on the door, they demanded answers. Dr. Cross, caught off guard, invited them inside. "I didn't come here to harm anyone," he began, his voice steady but tinged with weariness. He admitted that his real name was Dr. Elliot Kane. He had been a surgeon in Boston but left after a controversial case where an experimental procedure he performed had both saved and destroyed lives. He sought refuge in Fayetteville, hoping to continue his work in secret. When Greg pressed him about the incident with the woman and the medical setup in his home, Dr. Kane confessed. The woman was a desperate patient seeking an unapproved treatment. He had agreed to help but was unprepared for the complications that arose. "I'm trying to do good," he insisted, "but not all progress fits within the confines of the law." The revelation divided Cedar Grove. Some neighbors, moved by Dr. Kane's sincerity, supported him, arguing that innovation often required stepping outside traditional boundaries. Others were appalled, fearing the potential consequences of harboring a man conducting unsanctioned surgeries. The debate reached a climax when law enforcement arrived, tipped off by an anonymous caller. Dr. Kane was arrested, but not before urging his supporters to look into his work. "Judge me by the lives I've saved, not by the rules I've broken," he said as he was led away. Months later, Cedar Grove returned to its quiet rhythm, though the events surrounding Dr. Kane left a lasting impression. Some residents whispered about his potential return while others preferred to forget. Claire, however, continued to advocate for his cause, inspired by the stories of patients who claimed he had given them a second chance at life. The house on Magnolia Lane stood vacant once more, its windows dark and its secrets buried. But for those who had met the mysterious surgeon, his legacy lingered, a haunting reminder of the fine line between heroism and hubris. In the end, the mystery surrounding the enigmatic surgeon left more questions than answers. Though his presence had initially unsettled the neighborhood, it also unearthed something deeper: a fascination with the unknown and a reminder that not everything can be neatly explained. Some neighbors chose to believe his intentions were noble, a man seeking redemption in his unconventional ways. Others remained wary, unable to shake the unease his secrets had sown. The house, once again quiet, became a lingering echo of the stories it had hosted, a symbol of the fragile boundary between normalcy and intrigue. If you enjoyed unraveling this tale of suspense and hidden truths, don't forget to like this story, subscribe for more captivating narratives, and share it with someone who loves a good mystery. Your support helps keep these stories alive, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.